Hello ladies and gents, it's T.Rex here, and today I have a very special video prepared for you. As you know, recently we had this interesting paper that has come out a couple weeks ago, and it was basically about discussing the scaly integument of Tyrannosaurids. And this has actually caused quite a lot of arguments over the internet, Facebook in particular, both among the, fan community and the actual, probably some of the scientists as well, to a degree. But that is not what I'm here to discuss right now. I'm actually going to do a video response to Trey the Explainer, who recently released a video claiming that nothing actually changes in regards to this paper, in contrast to his other video that he has produced a long time ago about did T-Rex have feathers. Well, let's just say I'm kind of shocked at how he does things, and I will point out in more detail as the video progresses. One by one, I picked up the main points and quoted him directly in to as much accuracy in terms of as far as the wording goes as possible. So and I will just address them in particular without actually using his footage in the video. But anyway, before you proceed, please do watch the video first, because that will really help to understand what I'm actually addressing. Well, number one, he says, the discovery in actuality, to anyone who read the paper itself, changes very little. I disagree. In fact, on the contrary. You see, the paper actually does examine what has never really been published for the first, this is for the first time it has been examined properly, and a lot of the valuable references here to other work have been made, such as Kulindadromeus, which I will address in my next point sometime in this video. And I gotta say that with a lot of logical deduction as well, it is quite, possible to actually say that they do indeed suggest that Tyrannosaurids were entirely scaly. And they only just leave the dorsal part out, as having maybe as some kind of filament or maybe even feathers whatsoever, with the chance of 2.7% if you do the math. This is the part that's been conveniently left out by all the pro-feather, arguments, and, well, this guy here is no exception. I mean, there is an Albertosaurus specimen that has actually been described here for the first time. This is in a supplement material, and basically the other Gorgosaurus one as well, it's not the same one. The Bell et al. 2017 described a new one. That's not the same impression of Gorgosaurus that has been described by Carr and Capellus. And of the 5 species that have been described in the new paper, 4 of them have actually been properly addressed here for the first time. I mean, here as in the paper. Also, the fact that they mention 10 additional scale impressions on Wyrex specimen beyond what was featured and publicly released as well, that is also quite telling. I mean, of course, we're going to only take into account what has been published in the paper, or what has at least been directly referenced to maybe other work or certain specimens. But just so you guys understand, there is more to it than this, and I'm pretty sure eventually this will also come to light, and there is nothing there that shows feathers. I can probably give you maybe 99.9% chance there isn't. Yeah, here we have the number 2. It goes like, most of the tiny skin impressions are primarily in the locations we already knew to be scaly in other feathered dinosaurs. And he shows the examples of Juravenator, Kulindadromeus, and Concavenator. all examples are incorrect. Regards to concavenator, well, it does not follow the pattern of the quill knobs, and it has been addressed in the paper, which you can see here on screen. I put the screenshot of it, and here is the title of the paper as well. You can either try to Google it and see it for yourself if you wish. This is just basically the only paragraph in the paper that addresses it, because the paper is about different things actually. But if you wish to read the rest of it, then feel free. And it's also available, at least it should be available, in our library in a group on Facebook called Paleo World. Here is the screenshot of the group, just so you can recognize it. So if you are going to submit the membership, please do make sure somehow, maybe if you can, supplement it with a message saying that you want to download papers, so that the admins, myself included, will know that you're not there for the spam. And well, we'll figure something out. But whatever it is, you can either find it on Google. If not on Google, we will have it in our library already by now. Now, that's for the concavenator. And Kulindadromeus, that's another example. You see the original paper that actually described the structures, I believe it was Gutterfoyt et al., if I'm not mistaken. If I am mistaken, then sorry about that, but the original paper on Kulindadromeus, which described the structures, actually never described them as something that would even closely resemble to feathers, despite the fact that he refers to them as feathers. I mean, the author of the paper. Which is very confusing, and so the new paper has been released, which unfortunately is in Chinese, but here is the title. You can also download it from our library in Paleo World and use the Google Translate. So that's the best that can be provided at the time, but I'm hoping eventually it will be translated and imported into the English language as well. So this paper discusses the fact that these structures do not represent feathers, they actually represent the highly modified, yeah, my goodness. Yes, they represent the highly modified scales or something of the like. So they are just the unique structures that have been developed in the species, similarly to how turkeys develop their beards, or iguanas have their spikes on the top, or you can have these longisquama, critters that have these weird kind of elongated scaly things. And you have these other things like Psittacosaurus that has bristles as well. And none of these are feathers. They are all modified scales, except for the turkey beard, which is a different type of filament. And it's non-homologous to feathers. It's a totally different type of filament. But nevertheless, this is basically to show that this is one of those unique cases when they develop something unique to their own species. The question here should be is whether or not they play any particular function. But stating that this is an example of feathers and scales coexisting in this pattern just so it perfectly and conveniently fits within, the partially feathered, partially scaly T.Rex, that's kind of, well, not kind of, that's utterly wrong. Now, Juravenator is another problematic issue here. You see on the screen, there is nothing that's actually visible that would represent any hint of filaments under this UV shot. And this is very interesting how they just really try to rush into the whole, conclusion that yes, it had both of these. You know what's funny? That even if Juravenator did actually have these filaments, there is a very, very high chance they would actually be equivalent to what Kulindadromeus has, which has been described in that paper that I've mentioned a few moments ago. So I will not personally advise to consider this as an argument unless you can actually further test and prove it that it is the case, because even other people who looked at it, I mean, they all admit that, in the right sense of mind, that there is really not enough here to actually support the idea of filaments. Even under this UV that they provide, you can't see it. I just can't see it. And I don't see why people are just using this and trying to shove it down people's throats. Even so, let's assume for a second that their assumptions are correct. You're basing your assumption on one particular exception and trying to apply an exception as if that's the rule. That's not quite how science works. There are rules and there are exceptions, and rules are applied universally, but exceptions are always treated as they are exceptions. So that's about that one. And yeah, I still, this is basically one of the things that I wanted to say, that it doesn't actually prove the feathers in Tyrannosaurids. It's just completely off the point. And we do actually have some cases of filaments on the torso impressions and tail impressions, which are covered in feathers, which are on the specimens of Dilong and Eutyrannus. And well, to be perfectly honest, you have to kind of have a better argument, something that's a bit outside of the phylogenetics, because, as you can see in this cladogram featured by the paper, it gives you quite a good figure of percentage of likelihood of scales in this, in the Tyrannosaurids. And unlike the author of the video that I'm responding to, they have actually made quite an extensive amount of work to test it. I haven't seen him actually backing up anything in his claims properly, aside from just using various irrelevant, pointless and cheap shots, just random stuff that is not actually even on point, as I have mentioned before. But not to worry, let's move on to the next point. Number 3, his quote is, "Paper doesn't really go into where exactly they are located." Excuse me, it does list where they were located and even provides the details of sizes and shapes. And, this is one of those other cases of willful ignorance. Again, you see how many times this is, like, several times throughout this video. He only made 6-minute video, and this is already the second time when you see the willful ignorance on the author's side. I mean, unbelievable. Look at the chart. Do you see, where these scales are located? You see this chart? This is actually being peer-reviewed as well by professionals in the field. And, it shows you exactly where they are located, and I do hope that it's pretty clear on how widespread it was. And it's definitely not the size of the coin. Yeah, number 4, he's saying that feathers can exist intermixed with scales as it does in many dinosaur species, both extinct and living. Just because there are scale impressions, it does not rule out filaments entirely. Well, bird feet are kind of a wrong example, Mike, because they don't really fit. I mean, bird feet and many of the other limbs and, from feathered dinosaurs, they fit the pattern. The pattern is that the limbs are actually scaly. And you know why? Because feathers simply cease to develop in certain areas of the body, which are mainly limbs and snouts. And those processes, basically, they stop feathers from growing, as in developing from, the very early stages. And as a result, you get is reticule kind of things, which are essentially feathers that are just underdeveloped. And as a result of the lack of development of feathers, you have scales in some areas, like the scutes, that formulate later on in the developmental stages. What I will point out is, this is the point where I think he's clearly ignoring the idea of homology between the integuments and how they interact. And there is actually been a study in 2009, this is the paper, and this here is the quote from the paper, which basically briefly describes the process. However, you just can't really just splice them together like that and say, oh yeah, this is how it works. Then again, I've seen like a lot of times owls being used as example. I mean, owls is a very specific example. It's one of those exceptions from the rules where things like that happen. And I already mentioned it about exceptions and having them used as if they are the rules, which is not what science does. You can't automatically just judge things by exceptions. You have to look at general rules and apply them unless further evidence shows otherwise. That is how science works. Anyway, this paper on EvoDevo actually points out quite a lot of interesting things on the development, and they do say that yes, you can in a certain way get feathers to form on scales, but you can only do so by messing with the developmental program. You cannot actually just expect this to happen naturally. And the other thing as well is that you have to understand, which is also one of the things that this paper explains, that feathers and scales are far from interchangeable. So that comes into play during the developmental stages of when integuments start forming. I really think that the best way to really point to this is just to download the paper. It's also available in our group. It's the Duali, if I'm pronouncing it right, 2009, and specifically on page 7 they have a quote there, which is right here on the screen for you, just to view. But I would advise for those who really want to understand the depth of the process, is read the whole paper, and it's basically very technical 20 pages of pure biochemistry. Yeah, have fun, Trey, reading that. Okay, number 5, he's saying both feathered and scaly regions on the body coexisting is very common, and yeah, shows the naked skin of ostrich with no scales. And that's very interesting one. Like I already said, the ostrich body is actually showing naked skin. It's not a good and definitely not a valid example to illustrate the case he's trying to make. That's really not how it's done. All it shows is that the animal lost its feathers as a process of adaptation, and it did not grow scales there. Because, well, after it lost the feathers, you just have the bare skin. You can't have scales regrowing there. It's not interchangeable in that direction. That's me citing the EvoDevo once again. That paper that I said 20 pages long. So while you're still reading it, I will continue with the video. And yeah, I mean, this is really, this is wrong, because he obviously treats the feathers and naked skin as if it's the same thing, and this is clear misinformation. So yeah, somebody who's trying to, if he's genuinely trying to educate somebody, this is really a bad way to do it. I mean, like, it's really funny that if the keratinous structures like feathers are too damn delicate to preserve, then why would squishy skin bumps show up? This is really kind of, this is nonsense, to be perfectly fair. You can't expect, I want to hear what sort of plausible scenario he would, be able to produce to actually properly, scientifically test it without using the cheap shot diagrams, and actually really research proper material and actually quote it as it is, and no cherry picking, which we will get to in a minute. So once again, lots of willful ignorance. So yeah, I want to see some actual, presentation of the case and actual plausible and testable scenario that can prove that these Scaly imprints are indeed a naked skin, and they simply did not preserve the feathers, but they should have had them when the animal was, you know, buried and whatever. So yeah, present your case please on that part, will you? Number 6. Even Eutyrannus had scaly sections on its body. Really? Right, so yeah, that's funny because there has been no paper or detailed description or any repeated, you know, revisited research of the specimens that has been documented ever since it was first described. Now, I have tried the Control F function in the PDF version of the paper, and the only time they ever referred to scales were the patches related to the later Tyrannosaurs. Nothing to actually even close to suggest that they had any of the scaly patches on Eutyrannus. Yeah, once again, please provide the references and present your case, because this sounds just like another bold claim which has no backup to it. Moving on. Number 7. Impressions are isolated and tiny, no bigger than a postcard. I think you got your... you really need to go and, you know, do an eye test as of now, because, well, this chart, and note the credits mentioned in the chart as well, before you start judging and nitpicking at how it's inaccurate or whatever. It has been peer-reviewed. I'm sure you should know what peer-reviewed means if you intend to educate people on your channel. So yes, yeah, this is definitely not only bigger than a coin, and a postcard, but it's actually, some people even compared something to the laptop. That's actually bigger than a laptop. Oh, what do you know? Yeah, number 8. They probably had feathers along its back or dorsum. Yeah, with a 2.7 chance of percent whatever of this happening in Tyrannosaurid family. This very tiny detail that he left out because he didn't bother doing math. The laziness and willful ignorance is just overwhelming in that video. Number 9. Willing to completely ignore the truth. Well, yes, I mean, media does have problems, I understand, they have flashy headlines, but the funny thing is, the truth is still the same as it was even before the paper came to be. There was never any supporting evidence for feathers in Tyrannosaurids. And yes, once again, ignoring Evo-Devo studies, which I mentioned. Remember, 20 pages worth of reading. Go ahead. Don't like make your viewers wait too long, mate. Just go ahead and read it, and perhaps maybe, you know, make a video saying that you were wrong about what happened and blah blah blah. Oh, who am I kidding? Yeah, willful ignorance again. Moving on. Number 10. Jumping to great assumptions without reasonable evidence. Excuse me, there is reasonable evidence, and there is just so much willful ignorance here. It's really... oh my god, you can see that I'm probably just boiling here by now at the number 10 by the end of this response video. This is ridiculous. Does this guy actually ever bother to properly do his research? My goodness. What is going on? Ignoring Evo-Devo again, more willful ignorance again. How many times did I already say that? Yeah, 20 paper pages. Read it. Pure biochemistry technical stuff. Have fun. Number 11, okay? Partially feathered, partially scaly Rex is still very plausible. Based on what, mate? Honestly, based on what? Like, I have really yet to see anybody to present a case that can confirm such a thing. Once again, we're ignoring Evo-Devo, 20 pages, remember, pure biochemistry, technical stuff, get cracking, time is ticking. And yeah, that's really not possible so far. There has been no record of any animal in history to actually do this. all examples that he demonstrated here are absolutely wrong, and there is no example to demonstrate such thing being plausible in the way that it has been shown. And again, if we were to try to make an exception, it's a very unwise and incorrect kind of stance from a scientific point of view to make a rule of an exception. How many times do I have to hammer this nail until it's being, taken for how it is? That's not how science works, damn it. Anyway, yeah, this really just looks more like trying to feather in the gaps, really. That's what they're doing. They're just gonna be feathering every single gap until they will find, I don't know, a resurrected T-Rex that would actually show the real thing. And even then they would say it cannot be accurate because the problems during resurrections removed all feathers. That's probably what will happen. Just mark my words. And yes, I mean, the fully scaly idea has, on the other hand, been tested thoroughly by Bell et al. The paper that he's trying so hard, well, actually not trying so hard to debunk, and it does have an actual statistical analysis that backs the scaly argument. And yes, I can see, obviously, trying to again promote Saurian here and how they're partially feathered and scaly Rex and the like is all plausible, but that defies the integument patterns found in modern birds. So this actually then defies the very notion of relationship of birds between dinosaurs, which is basically what is being deducted from this point that he was saying about insisting that this is plausible. So does that mean, Trey, that you're implying that dinosaurs and birds are not related then? Because this clearly breaks the already well-established pattern. And to break it, you would have to have some seriously compelling evidence to actually back this up. Yeah. When you have enough evidence and actual facts and tests from a scientific source, then you can make a video and maybe present your case. Until then, it's just wishful thinking bullshit. Yeah, number 13. They should thoroughly research their topic. I'm extremely disappointed with how they handle this story. I don't want to swear, so I will just say this. What an irony, mate. GTFOH. Everybody probably knows what that means. Yeah, that's all I can say. You should really look in the mirror more often. My goodness. And number 13, the final point in this list. The real crime here is that this entire fixation on the T-Rex scales as drawing attention away from a way cooler discovery. Bias alert. Yeah, the thing is, you see, all discoveries are cool in their own right, so who are you to define what is cooler and what's not cooler? I mean, yeah, of course, some of them may be a bit more groundbreaking than the others, but that doesn't make them cooler. All discoveries in this field are cool, and we don't define this in that way in science. All discoveries are valuable for science. If you knew anything about it, as in about science, you would understand that. Yeah, clear bias, because that's his way to basically demonstrate that this is more important than that. He's trying to force the idea of, thinking that anything feather related is more important than anything otherwise suggested. So, yeah. I mean, more willful ignorance once again. And yeah, I mean, he sees the situation this way because he likes it that way. It's very obvious by now. And I'm surprised why many people are not seeing this. Maybe because it's being younger age, lack of life experience at this point in time, to unable to actually quickly, spot bullshit when they see it. That will take time eventually, I'm sure. I've been there too. We've all been young one time or another, during the life. But I can already say I call bullshit on this. So if he wants to educate people, He should really step outside of his little comfort zone and actually educate facts and not fairy tales that are mostly equivalent to the whole flat earth or creationist propaganda of Ken Ham. Yes, both are pretty much the same. Very dogmatic, willfully ignorant, because they just want to see the world how they want it, not how it actually is. Suck it up. Rubbing more salt, mate, for you. So I hope you really reconsider this, and I'm really hoping you're gonna start making some educational videos that are telling the truth and how it is, because all of this sounds like another propaganda, and well, I would not be surprised to find out that it actually is. And to be fair, anybody who's willingly following him, you should really start thinking about whether or not his claims are actually correct. You see, this is a 6-minute video, and I pointed out already quite a number of fundamental errors that he's made in his discussion. 6-minute video only. I mean, can you imagine how many more problems that could be potentially dug up if we were to dig into like his 20 or 30-minute long videos? I don't even think I can stomach it for that long. So, yeah, that's my response to his video, and I hope this will help people who really want to be educated with real facts, with science. And here are some useful research materials. So, just going to list some papers for you guys to take a look at that I've mentioned in this video as a quick summary. Also, feel free to join our Paleo World group. This is where we have a library of these papers where you can download them directly if you so wish. And, well, what can I say? If he does make a video and correct himself, I will definitely take my hat off. If eventually my words are gonna be proven wrong, then I will eat all of them up, every single word. I promise, I will eat it and I will film it. Okay, you have my word. But until then, I'm fairly confident that every single point made here, obviously to the best of my knowledge, but it's actually all backed up by scientific evidence. I did not make this stuff up, okay? Unlike some. So yeah, I mean, for somebody who is trying to explain science, I would say this is a rather misleading title. So maybe it's worth renaming himself for now as Trey the Complainer rather than Explainer, because he seems to be failing miserably at explaining things properly. So yeah, ciao. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, by the way.